Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. My name is Jean Chawapiwa. I'm the Country Director for We Connect International in South Africa. We have a really exciting partnership with Procter & Gamble in South Africa that is starting today with this first webinar. And we're going to have 10 webinars in the next few weeks. So please keep in touch with us and join us for as many of them as you can. The exciting thing about today's webinar is this is targeted at women business owners. And we actually have two female experts from Procter & Gamble from their procurement team. We're delighted to have Natalie Musgrave and Laylah with us today. And I'm going to hand over now to Laylah to introduce herself and then introduce Natalie and go straight into the presentations. Please, we'd be grateful if you could put your questions in the chat box. There's a chat box at the bottom. We want you to keep your microphones off and your videos off, please, so we cut down the noise as we're recording the video. So please, we'll be watching the chat box for your questions. Over to you, Laylah.
Hi, I'm Laylah Kara. I have been with Procter & Gamble for 11.5 years, and I've all this time been in purchasing. I have worked across multiple spend pools. So I have worked across facilities and real estate, what we call TDC, total delivered cost. That's for plant spend. I've worked across a BBS non-media, that's brand building services. I currently do logistics, and in my previous assignment, I did capital. So all wealth of experience in purchasing, and I have 3 kids. That's about me. I will now hand over to Natalie so she can do the same type of introduction on her experiences and personal life as well.
Thanks, Laylah. So my name is Natalie Musgrave. I am presently responsible for non-media purchases at Procter & Gamble. My core expertise is actually media and creative agency services. I've had the pleasure of working outside of corporate before. I worked for Media 24. I've worked for media agencies. Yeah. And I'm a mom to a 3-year-old little boy. So this picture is quite a few years ago. One of my favorite memories. Very, very busy little guy and a full-time job on its own. We're looking forward to having a really engaging session with you guys and hope you find it very useful. We are going to turn off our cameras now as well, so it doesn't interfere with the connectivity. Please feel free at any point to send questions, and as we go along, we'll answer them. Next slide.
Sure. Here we go.
Awesome. So in today's agenda, we're going to cover a couple of things, namely, what is purchasing? What do we do? What are the purchasing priorities? Some of the categories we manage in P&G. I'll cover those sections, and then we'll go into some Q&A if there's anything that you want to know more about what was discussed prior. Laylah will take you through the purchasing cycle, how to enter the P&G supply chain, and then we'll actually do some examples, some real examples on how to help you understand how to meet P&G's business needs and the criteria that are. Again, we'll follow with Q&A. So if there's any questions that you have for Laylah, we'll answer those. And then we'll close out on how to get in contact with us. Awesome. Hope you guys are excited.
Natalie, it's Jean. Just as you start, can you just raise your voice just a little bit? We're straining a little bit to hear you.
Sure. Is this a little bit better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So procurement function at P&G extends well beyond the traditional administrative function of simply buying goods and services, right? Purchasing is a very strategic discipline. It involves understanding the importance of how purchasing contributes to delivering the business results. It entails strategic sourcing of suppliers, strategic selection of goods and services, negotiation, I think that's what we're most renowned for, and ensuring that key agreed objectives and KPIs are met. All the while managing supplier relationships, as well as internal relationships, which is a lot trickier than you can imagine. Overall performance, good governance and stewardship compliance, and delivering overall good value for money. P&G owns every single dollar. In terms of the purchasing priorities, so P&G has, let me start from just to give you some context, right? We have a great responsibility to our consumers, to the consumers we serve, right? It's important that we always ensure that our products remain competitively priced, are readily available, and we are agile and able to adapt to the changing needs of our consumers. And it becomes, this is why these key priorities become so important, and why it's so important that we ensure a readily available supply of suppliers into our supply chain. Some of the things that we look at, right, is cost and value creation. So cost, yes, it's really important that we drive cost improvements year on year. And beyond that, I think a very traditional way of looking at procurement is always cutting costs, but we also look at how do we create value through cost. The second one is cash, and this is to enable cash flow growth. So when we talk about cash, it's largely around payment terms, and ensuring that, you know, so standard payment terms within P&G can range between 75 to 120 days, and making sure that the business has cash available, whether it's for innovation, whether it's for new projects. The third one is service delivery, so making sure that the business gets the high quality of service that they expect, and also it's managing the relationships to deliver the best possible service. And then lastly, and one that's often overlooked, is stewardship and good governance. So making sure that we are adhering to local legislation, making sure that we align to industry-based practices, and just general good governance in terms of contracts and spending the company's money responsibly. So some of the spend, so this is quite an extensive list, but these are the categories that we manage at P&G. They don't all, the purchasing buyers don't all sit locally, they sit all around the world. We have what we call brand building services. That includes media, PR, points of sale, sales and merchandising, promoters and premiums. We also have logistics, capital, maintenance and repair operations, global asset recovery, which is waste management, real estate and facilities, external supply solutions, which is like your contract manufacturing, raw materials and packaging, and lastly, low-touch buying, which is spend that is a lot smaller, I guess, that we bid out. Awesome. Thanks, Laylah. So I wanted to share the supplier and market segmentation model with you, because each category, each purchasing category has its own unique characteristics and strategic approach in the way in which we engage suppliers. So for you to understand, 80% of the spend we manage needs to be covered by a sourcing strategy. And these are led by different buyers globally and regionally, right? And the purchasing strategy depends on two things, right? On your x-axis, it's the strategic importance, right? And that is your volume expenditure, profitability, total cost of ownership. And then on your y-axis, your supply risk, so the complexity of the supply market, which would be, is there a monopoly with suppliers? Do you have a vast range of suppliers to access? Any barriers to entry? And just generally the complexity of the category that we manage, right? And each category would sit in a different quadrant, and we engage the suppliers accordingly, right? Each category, like I said, has its own set of characteristics. And if we start from the bottom around non-critical items, right? These purchases have little impact or risk to our business activity. They generally low-cost goods and services, and there's an abundant supply of suppliers. And so generally, it's not, there's minimal attention given. And I say that very loosely because there's actually a lot of work that goes behind it in terms of competitive bidding. And a category that would sit in here is like your low dollar spend, your office supplies, stuff that is easy to purchase. Leverage, the second one on your top left-hand side, leverage items. These are low-cost services, right? Low-cost services, that's right. However, these purchases have a significant impact on the company's business and is strategically important, right? And the strategies that we apply here is maximizing our buying power, and getting suppliers to compete with each other to get the best total value, so that we can get the best total value. Sometimes it involves negotiating and substituting products because it's not easily available. The third one is strategic items, right? And these are largely high cost and often unique, specialized services, right? So they have a high risk to the company. Strategically, when engaging suppliers that play in the space, and you're looking more at media, creative agencies, you're developing long-term strategic partnerships with these suppliers. This is a natural scarcity. And also in the case of media and creative, they are custodians of your brand equity. So you can't just swap suppliers in and out. In the bottom right-hand side, we have bottleneck items, right? And these purchases are high cost, but low risk. And there's often a limited supply or very small handful of suppliers. In terms of a strategic approach, we seek to guarantee volumes, we, again, manage supplier relationships, and we try and secure stock and supplies and put backup suppliers in place. And why I wanted to share this slide with you guys is it's really very important that you understand where your business fits in this quadrant, because it will really inform how you engage with purchasing, right? Understand what is your competitive advantage, right? What sets you apart from your peers? And when engaging procurement, help them understand this and tailor your communication and your proposals to help them meet their business objectives beyond just providing a service, right? And also think very carefully, how are you as a company engaging your suppliers?
Alrighty. Great. So
There was a lot of information. Do you guys have any questions?
yeah, so I've noted 2 questions that we have. I think more than this. Okay, there's a bit more than the 2 I noted, but let's take it one at a time. And we'll try our best to answer the questions as you have them. So the first one is curious about logistics as I run a courier company. So logistics forms part of our facilities and real estate spend area. I'm not sure what more is needed in the question. So if maybe you could elaborate more on what the details of the question you're asking. We could help to answer it accordingly. So yes, we use a courier service today. We use a company to do courier for us. We have a contract in place with them. Maybe that helps to answer. We have a spend pool that courier services fall under. But happy to hear more from you, Penny, in terms of how we can best answer your question. The next question, where do services fit into the spend pools? Consulting services, to be more specific.
You want to go back one slide, Laylah?
Okay, sure. There we go.
Depending on the consulting services, they would form part of, not brand building services, Laylah?
Well, it depends. There is a specialized spend pool as well, not listed here. It's called business and professional services, and I think that's where we would fit consultants into.
And there's different consultants as well. I mean, in the case of media, we have consultants that we could work with if we were doing a pitch. In terms of legal, they would also have access to a range of consultants, and I think that falls closely to the category Laylah just mentioned now.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. How is the legal department underpinning the procurement strategy? Do they sit with the business? So I'm not entirely sure how to answer this. So we have a legal department. Are you inquiring about legal services, purchasing, procuring legal services? Or are you referring to how contracts are drawn up and aligned with legal? So if you can give us a bit more details on your question, I'll be happy to answer. Natalie, do you have any insight on this, on the question?
Your question, the help needed is what you've just said now makes sense, Laylah. I think we need to understand the question a little bit better.
Okay. The next question we have is, I provide ergonomics and health and safety services. Where do they fit in? So normally health and safety services, we fit into our DC facility services. So it would be plant-based and DC-based. We have a safety organization both at the plant and the DC. I would think that it would fit into those categories. We have a health and safety manager both in the plant and the DC. So it will most likely fit under total delivered cost. Alrighty. Next question. Do you have more details about the share of spend within the framework of the 4 segmentation quadrants and the spend pool's percentages, or an understanding of the largest buckets? Yes, we do. So the short answer is yes. We know where our spend buckets are the largest. We can get into it, but it would take another session to understand. Maybe there's a question that leads from this question that would be easier to answer without having to take you through the P&G spend data. Okay.
I mean, for perspective, I mean, the categories, the biggest spend pools, we're talking about millions at a local level. And if we would develop, a lot of the strategies actually originate from global, and they are localized to meet the local market nuances. And when they're developing a strategy globally, I mean, they're looking at the spend across the world or regionally, right? So you're talking billions.
Unless you're referring to just the South African market, which is how I read it. But yes, it's still a difficult question because we have various buckets that make it up. Just to share very high level, we have our biggest spends coming out of the marketing. We have the big spend coming out of logistics. We have big spends coming out of manufacturing. So there you have it. I think that's just very top line. I hope that answered the question. I think I missed one. Oh, okay. No, it wasn't. It was someone Dana wanting to supply legal services. So Dana, if you have legal services to supply, where we can take the question offline. Post the discussion, post the training. I believe this is all the questions we have for now. Natalie, should we continue?
Yes.
Alrighty. Okay, then I wanted to take you through the purchaser's life cycle, and it's maybe more. You're probably thinking of the business you have, looking at our spend pool, seeing where you fit in. And so then it's good to then look at how it all starts. So it starts with the business need, and the business need would come from a spend area that's governed by a strategy. So we'll have a business need, we'll do a market assessment, we'll find a supplier, we'll make the purchase, receive the goods, and we pay. So this is the easy life cycle. The next slide goes into a bit more detail on how the work gets done. Okay. So really how to enter the P&G supply chain. Like I said, we have a business need linked to a spend area. We would, if this is something new for a buyer, or if a landscape assessment hasn't been done for a while, we would do a landscape or market assessment. This is to make sure that we are getting the best total value. This is to make sure that we maintain our own knowledge of the market, and that we see it come through in our business objectives, that we see it coming through in the decisions we make for the business. And this depends on your overall strategy. So in P&G, your sourcing strategy cannot exceed more than 3 years. So at a minimum, your sourcing strategy is done every 3 years, or your landscape or market assessments done every 3 years, to maintain your knowledge of the market and make sure that it comes through in your decision making. Then we do a pitch process. So what leads directly from the market assessment is your decision on who your suppliers are. It's your decision on what the market is doing. Are commodity prices going up? Are they going down? And how does that impact your business? Your pitch process I called it a pitch process, but really it can be any of 3 things. It could be a benchmarking exercise that you want to do, so an RFI, a request for information. You could send out an RFQ, which is a request for a quotation, get different quotes from suppliers. It can be an RFP, a request for proposal, formal pitch process, end to end. And this one usually leads to a change in business. You could also, I mean, maintain your same supplier, provided that they have participated in the pitch process. Now, in P&G, we have something called an incumbency policy. So no matter when we pitch the business, your incumbent supplier is always invited to the pitch. Okay. Next, and I'll take you a little bit more into detail on what best total value means for Procter & Gamble, with a real life example of a pitch that was conducted. We look at various items in this range of what we call best total value. As Natalie mentioned earlier, cost, cash, service are fundamental. We also look at BEE, payment terms, which links to cash, relationship with the supplier, technology, insights. Your supplier becomes your second arm of Procter & Gamble, because you're on the ground, you are seeing what's happening in the trade more than what the people in the business are seeing. Then we do supplier selection. So a part of supplier selection process is internally part of the Procter & Gamble processes. We have something called separation of duties. So I can't do everything end to end. I can't write an allocation recommendation and then also approve my allocation recommendation. This needs to be done by my one-up manager. So we have lines of authority on spend thresholds. Then we award business based on the supply selection and the internal alignment. If the supply is new, we'd have to do a vendor loading process. This could take up to 3 months depending on the type of information that you have access to. Part of the vendor loading process, we have a system that governs it. If you deal with personally identifiable information, there are additional check steps that need to be adhered to. If you deal with highly restricted data, there are additional check steps that need to be adhered to. If you have relationships with government on behalf of Procter & Gamble, there are additional check steps that need to be adhered to. If you have none of those, then it could be an easy 5-day process. And then obviously we need to manage relationships. So I think this is part of where learnings really happen, managing the relationship, ongoing, reviewing your KPIs, reviewing your performance, and seeing how it's working for both parties. Because you need to be profitable, we need to be profitable for the relationship to be sustainable. KPIs need to be met for both parties so that the relationship is sustainable. All right, then I want to take you a little bit into a real example. So I'm going to go out of presentation mode just to access the slides. Okay. So this was a real pitch that was conducted. I'm going to start at the briefing process. The in-store activations, so a little bit of background on what in-store activations are. In-store activations it's a direct-to-consumer activation that happens in the store. So normally we'd have a brand ambassador that represents one of our brands, so Ariel, Pampers, or whichever we choose. They talk to consumers about the brand, and hopefully we'll have a link to sale. Also included in the scope, depending on which brand is in scope, they would have a demo. So we would do product demonstrations, but never sampling in store. Okay. So just to go through the brief that I'm sharing. Your typical brief will include who the target person is. So this is a typical brand brief. obviously different spend pools would have a different type of brief to ensure that all the data is transferred to the supplier to enable them to quote accurately for the business. Because the worst thing that could happen in any pitch process is that once you've awarded business, there would be scope creep items or cost coming up that wasn't concluded accurately in the pitch process. So we try to get our briefs to be as accurate as possible. In this area, we had to detail who the target consumer is, specific for brand, where we would rather we would not obviously talk to or target to talk to a mom with teenage kids about Pampers. It doesn't really sit in the right target segment, and it would not lead to the right type of sale. Insights. So we provided insight into who the consumer is. So this was typically, we used an aerial example for this brief. So we detailed that, how the consumer needed to be educated, and what was quality reach and who was the type of consumer. Okay. We shared dates in terms of what needed to be done when, and what the objectives were of an in-store activation. So it's to drive education, drive sales and conversion. I mentioned this, positive ROI, and a link to sale. So this is why we do things. I'm going to take you a little bit into the details of how we evaluated suppliers. So we sent the pitch out to 7 suppliers. This is not normally, we don't normally use 7 suppliers, so it was an exceptional process that we did. The reason we did this exceptional process is that we were interacting with various suppliers doing DTC, so direct-to-consumer services for Procter & Gamble. And we wanted to get a sense check of which had the best capability in the space. And we had a list of criteria that we wanted to evaluate the suppliers on. So the first set of criteria that you'll see here, it was adhering to the pitch process and acceptance of P&G terms and conditions. We asked for various things in the pitch in terms of, so accompanied by that brief was a tender document. I didn't include it here, but it included dates and gates of what the expectations of delivering this brief and delivering this pitch was. So really just an outline of the pitch process. And it also outlined the Procter & Gamble terms and conditions, which you can also find on the supplier portal. How we compared the suppliers, we used a rating scale. So on column C, you would see a rating. So here we weighted what the importance of each of these factors, vendor comparison factors, were to Procter & Gamble. Then we rated them, and column F is a calculation. So each supplier has the same columns. I removed the supplier names just to have it fair and not divulge unnecessary information about suppliers. So you'd see each supplier was evaluated on the same criteria and in the same way. And we looked for this particular scope, we looked at status of development and technology. So this was important because we wanted to do brand tracking. We wanted to be able to track ROI. We wanted to see what technology was available in the industry and what was available to the supplier. We looked at our relationship with the vendor. So in not all cases, we had even if it was a P&G known supplier, we may or may not have had a relationship with the supplier. In some cases of this particular pitch, we knew the supplier had worked with them many years ago, stopped working with them for some or other reason, and started engaging again. So this relationship with vendor was an important one for P&G. Alternate commercial model. So like I mentioned when I talked through the briefing process, the commercial objective of in-store ambassadors is to convert to sale. When this happens, we get ROI. So the alternate commercial model was something that we were interested in the time because it was a direct link to sale. Meaning that if a brand ambassador had converted 3 people, we pay the agency based on this conversion. The alternate to the sales model was pay for activity. So tracking reach. So for every person that the ambassador talks to, we count it as reach. They've reached 3 people, they've reached 5 people in this store, that store. So that was the other alternate that we were using at the time, the tracking based on reach. Brand ambassador tracking, this was very important for Procter & Gamble at the time, and still today. The reason for this is it was a direct link to proof of performance. The agencies we were looking at were able to track brand ambassadors in store, that they were going to the right store. We had issues in the past where the brand ambassadors were going to a store close to the store that they were supposed to be at. Now, at P&G, we do something called verification, where we verify that an agency is at the store that they were supposed to be in. This happens in most areas of marketing activity, where we verify reach, we verify activity, to ensure that we're spending in the right way and we are stewards of the business. Okay, and we expect the same from our suppliers. It's not a checking up on a supplier activity, it's to ensure that everyone is getting the right type of data per the activation requirements. Knowledge and insights, as I mentioned previously, we expect that our agencies are an extension of us. In terms of agency knowledge, when you have a brand ambassador in the trade all day, over a weekend period, they're able to tell you the peaks and troughs of the activity. They are able to give you insights of what other brands are doing in store. They're able to tell you what competitions are running and what we should be doing differently. So your knowledge and insights and how it comes through, whether it's system driven, whether it's written on a piece of paper, whether it's data that information that can be translated into data to be used at a later stage. These are the type of things we were looking at in this area. How well the supplier knows their business and the industry that we play in. Okay. Something else that I wanted to mention in terms of knowledge and insights. There was an agency that pitched for this business who worked in the food space. Now, in the food area is quite different to the products we play in. I'll give you a short example. In Procter & Gamble, in this area, we don't do sampling in store. It doesn't make sense because it would delay a purchase. Because you would go home, try the product, and then have to come back to store to make a purchase. In the food space, you would definitely pitch to say you want to sample in store. They taste it in store, it can be an immediate purchase. Then reporting capability. This was a big one in terms of POP. What we liked in this area was live dashboards in terms of reporting. Brand ambassadors were able to access an app on their tablets and directly report what was happening in store. They were directly able to report reach numbers. It came through on a live dashboard and didn't require waiting times. It also helped in terms of getting the right kind of proof of performance, and then the supplier to get paid on time. Because proof of performance it's an internal control and stewardship requirement, and we don't pay or GR services without the right proof of performance at Procter & Gamble. Agreed payment terms. So like Natalie said, this comes from a cost point of view, cost and cash. Procter & Gamble acceptable payment terms between 75 and 120 days. Within Procter & Gamble, we're already moving to 180 days. So we have, it's our stretch target at the moment is at 180 days. Then we had P&G known supplier, and then obviously BEE. So this is a focus area for us on broad-based economic empowerment. And it will continue to be a strategy for Procter & Gamble. This is all I have on the best value option analysis. I'll go back to the training deck. Do you have any questions?
Let me start with taking some of the questions then.
Sure, great, thanks.
How can new suppliers compete effectively? The scoring system suggests new suppliers are disadvantaged against existing suppliers.
So I'd like to know more about how you see the disadvantage, but a new supplier could have more insights versus an existing supplier. So just to elaborate more on how that pitch went, we appointed a brand new supplier that we had not done business with for the in-store business, and we awarded the whole of in-store activations to the supplier based on that one pitch. So we used the aerial as an example for the whole in-store business, and we awarded it to a brand new supplier. So no, it does not disadvantage new suppliers at all. It allows us to do the right market analysis, get the right data from the new supplier, and get the experiences in that particular industry.
May I add something? Sorry, that was me. So that also you understand that the criteria for assessment depends on the project and the job. The criteria for assessment is not necessarily always the same.
I agree. Is market research conducted locally or globally? Natalie, do you want to take that one?
Market research, we have a number of digital resources and suppliers who help us with this. If we're doing a pitch locally, or if we're doing the sourcing approach locally, we would brief it out locally. But if the strategy is global, they would do assessments throughout the region. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Alrighty, so does P&G have an open policy to disclose or share a list of current suppliers servicing specific areas of your business and their contact details or subcontracting reasons? Can you provide the focal point contact in P&G? Okay, so we don't have an open policy to disclose our current list of suppliers servicing specific areas. I'm not sure why this would be a requirement. What we do have is we have a policy where we keep supplier relationships within P&G. We don't disclose that. Supplier operating models we keep within P&G. We don't disclose that. It's part of fair business dealings. I don't think it would be fair business practice to disclose any supplier's information outside of where it needs to happen. Should you wish to talk further, I'm happy to answer the follow-on question or where this question is leading from.
Next question. From a BE perspective, when P&G engages with smaller suppliers, does the company consider preferential payment terms, which can lead to scoring of supplier development points?
Okay, so shorter payment terms, I think this, I think when Procter & Gamble assesses suppliers, we do a full assessment of the best total value elements.
I think, sorry, I will jump in a bit as well. Let me first introduce myself. So I'm Otto Meyer, I'm the purchasing manager for South Africa. Overseeing all the different spend pools together with Laylah, Mikel, and Natalie. So I think Laylah was spot on. At the end of the day, we look at the total value proposition, right? And a lot of the questions comes back to this. Right? First of all, P&G really values diversity, right? Internally, externally, globally, regionally, and all different levels, right? And all different types of diversity. On the other hand, we have a business model and we have shareholders that we also need to keep happy, right? So it's important, like it is on all of your own businesses, you need to make some kind of profit, right? You need to keep, if you have shareholders or you have owners, and you need to keep them happy as well. And you need to do what is right. So we do take in consideration a lot of different things, and specifically in South Africa, diversity is even more important, and even more so with what is happening currently in the country. And this is also why we invest in these trainings, is to help give more perspective, to build capability on smaller suppliers and specifically women-owned suppliers, so that all of you can become more competitive in our supply chain. So we consider a lot of things. And at the end of the day, if the value proposition on certain of the softer items become really big and important, then it might change a lot of the decisions in future. I hope that gives a bit more perspective.
Thank you, Otto. The next question we have is, could you please explain why it takes 3 months to load a vendor? Does it mean a supplier can't get work or get paid until they are loaded? Yes. So that's the short answer. So the explanation of why it could take up to 3 months to load a supplier is if you have if you fall under any of the 3 risk areas that I mentioned, there would be additional background checks that need to be done behind the scenes. So anti-bribery checks is when you have dealings with the government, we need to put a check step in place and an additional anti-bribery agreement in place that is vetted by our risk department. So Procter & Gamble have a third-party risk assessment that needs to be done. And this area falls under that. If there's a privacy concern, so if you are dealing with personally identifiable information of consumers or employees, there's an additional agreement that needs to be signed and an additional check step on that. And the last one was information security. So if you were dealing with highly sensitive data, so like brand plans, then or launching a new product for Procter & Gamble, there would be an additional check step that needed to happen. But like I mentioned, if you fall outside of those 3 categories, it would be a very simple 5-day loading process.
Yeah, and I think to
make sure the risk areas are covered.
To add on to what you were saying, P&G also has a very strict PO policy. We do not commence any work without a purchase order in place. And until you are loaded as a vendor and active in our system, we can't actually start working with you. We can't issue you with it.
Otto, sorry, did you want to add in something as well?
No, I just want to, yes, I wanted to emphasize what you said, right? I think it might look very scary, it takes 3 months. But if I look at the examples of a lot of, if it's a straightforward service or a product, right, and you are not dealing with any information from P&G side or any personal identifiable information, or we're not sharing anything with you, it's straightforward. Right now, if we need to share something with you, it's obviously it becomes very important for that we protect whatever data we're sharing, be it employee data, all these things, because it's all governed by different laws. Now, if you are a supplier for a service like that, and you have very good systems already in place, you will go through this process much faster. So, for example, if you will be like I need to make up something now. If we, for whatever reason, need to share our list of employee data with you, and you already have a very secure system to work with this data, and you have processes of how you will delete this data after you've used it, then it will not take 3 months to vet it, right? It will go a lot faster because you have the right security requirements already in place. It's an extreme example, but I think everyone can understand why it's important, because at the end of the day, P&G is obliged to protect our employee data and some sensitive information, and the suppliers we use need to be enabled to do that for us. Otherwise, we can get into much more serious troubles with the law and all the different things.
Thanks, Otto. Thanks, Natalie.
Last question, guys. If a company is not a vendor with P&G, how do we get visibility of RFQs and RFPs? Also, how do we become a vendor?
Okay, so
I'm happy to take it if no one else wants to take it. I've been quiet for too long now, so you need to give me some time to talk.
sure.
I think the excellent thing for the people that are on the call, right, and all the businesses on the call, is that we do have a very close relationship with WeConnect, right? So if we do need something very specific, right, we will always reach out and ask, like, what are the suppliers that you have that we can also use, like in this bidding process or in the RFI or whatever we're doing. The other way, like Laylah and Natalie already explained, is the market, like doing a market analysis, understanding what's out there. But in your specific case, I think that's what you're most interested in, is we do utilize the data that's coming from WeConnect. And we intentionally, some of you might have met me at the roundtables at the conference recently, right? A lot of the information that was shared there, I feed it back to the team on the call, like my team on the call, and say, if you need XYZ in future, please add this company, right? So all this data was fed back. Even on some of we have the coaching sessions and things as well, like we do listen and take note of what the different businesses are offering. And the reason we do that is, the end of the day, is our strategy on diversity. We need to diversify our supply chain and our supplier base, so we're very intentional about this. I can see some of the people on the call as well that I've recently dealt with as well, to help with some of the COVID-19 critical supplies. Any other questions?
Yes,
sorry, Laylah, please add.
There's a question linked to that one. So are your RFIs, RFQs and RFPs on an invitation-only basis, or are they advertised somewhere for all eligible businesses to respond to?
Oh, you want me to answer?
Yeah,
You should nominate someone. You want to. Okay. Yeah, so we use a system, right, which some of you might be familiar with, Coupa, and we put it out there. So we do not advertise it like in the paper and these things because we have our system. So again, it's critical that during these interactions, right, with We Connect, that we have a list of suppliers that can do a specific service, and then when we do bid it out in Coupa, we add the relevant suppliers in. Now, the reality of the situation is like some, for example, making a simple example again, if you are selling trees, for example, we won't necessarily buy trees every 10 years, right, or every year. We'll buy it every 10 years. Right? So there's certain things that's just not common in our business. And hence, not everyone will be invited every year, right? Some of the things is less frequent. And then there's some things that's more frequent, right? So it depends a lot as well what each business has to offer.
So I believe we have another link to the same type of question. We just want to apply or request to become a vendor at P&G.
So I think I answered it, right? Is you need to share with us, right, what type of services you have, and when we have a need, right, we will always include you in the bidding process. And sometimes, and Laylah, you need to please correct me if you're wrong, because you're a bit longer in purchasing than me. But sometimes you're not on the vendor list when you receive a bid as well. It's consequent out in the low touch buying area. It's consequent after being successful that you are loaded.
So another area that you can upload your details is the Otto touched on it, is we often use the We Connect connections to search for when we're looking for a particular service. So we have constant relationship discussions on this. Okay. What are key services that P&G is currently looking for? Otto, Natalie, anyone?
Do you want to answer? I think you have a bigger bird's eye view of.
It's a difficult question because we're looking for different things, right? And I don't see everything directly because it's a big business. So, it's a difficult one to answer, right? Because there's an endless list of things that's critical and not so critical. It need to be a bit more specific, right? If there's more information is needed to answer the question.
Okay, we have one last question, and that is, what is your percent spend with diverse suppliers and SMEs? And Otto, I think this one's for you.
I'm not sure if I can share that directly, right? I've never had a question like that. Like I mentioned as well, and some of the information is a bit confidential, like exactly how much we're spending as a business, because we're not a publicly listed company. Like I mentioned, is we are very intentional. Our strategy is big. There's a lot of diversity as part of our strategy, and specifically on that as well, because it's a government requirement and it links to our internal strategy. BE is very important for us. So we're very intentional as well in our strategies that we need to have businesses that is more than 30% women-owned, 50% Black-owned. We are very aware of the SME and EME like percentage targets. However, at the end of the day as well, we look, like Laylah and Natalie mentioned right in the beginning, is we need to look for the right quality of service, right? The right value proposition also in terms of cost and cash. So there's various elements, like the team actually explained, like that makes part of this decision. But the aim is to increase it year on year.
Alrighty, so I think we've come to the end of our questions. Thank you, everyone. If there's anything further, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, ladies. That was amazing. Thank you, Laylah. Thank you, Natalie. And Also, thank you to Otto for joining in. So we really have the PNG procurement team online, and Mikhail helped us to organize this. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you for the case study where you actually went through the criteria. That was very useful. We will share the slides and the recording with everyone on the call and everyone who registered. So you'll have an opportunity to go through the detail that was presented to you today. We have got a feedback form for this session. So please, when you get the email with the feedback form, do us a favor and just please fill it in. It just takes a few minutes. It really helps us to improve what we're doing and also how we handle the sessions. I just want to put a plug in for the session that we're doing on the 19th of May with Mangi Modal. He's the sales director for Procter & Gamble for South Africa. He's going to be talking about sales training and strategy for Procter & Gamble. So we're really excited about that. Please register and attend that session. And beyond that, for those who are not registered with We Connect International, it's actually very easy to register with us, and we can send you the link. My email is on the slide that's showing there. And from there, we'd like to end the session. So thank you very much, Laylah and Natalie, and Otto and the rest of the team. We'll see everybody on the next PNG and We Connect webinar. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.